Hello Bio 2, welcome to Marquette. Good morning. It's morning for me. I don't know if it's going to be morning for you when you're watching this. I hope that it is. Sunday morning here, and I'm in the land of desolated Marquette High School. So I wanted to recap a little bit where we've been, where we're going. We talked about the senses and we did eye structure and function, ear structure and function. I will be dissecting the eye for first period, and I'll post that soon enough, so you're required to watch that. In fact, I want both classes to watch that again. It'll be a 10-minute video, short, sweet. Take notes on it, please, and check it out. It's going to be a good review. We also talked about the sensation of touch. So our skin is a really important sense organ. Of course, it has other functions as well, but in terms of detecting stimuli from the outside world, whether we have stimuli that have to do with heat, cold, chemicals, pressure, all of these different skin receptors are going to be receiving that information. They're going to be converting that information into the common language of the nervous system. The common language of the nervous system is the action potential or nerve impulse. That's going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing in the next video. What exactly is an action potential? How does it work? How do nerve cells communicate with other nerve cells? And that's going to be coming up shortly. All right, be the next video. Well, I just wanted to finish up the senses. What are some of the other senses that we haven't talked about? I don't believe we've talked about them yet. What about taste? What are the taste sensations? We have taste buds. These taste buds are going to detect water-soluble molecules. There will be an action potential or nerve impulse generated at the taste bud, and then of course that nerve impulse is going to be sent to the brain eventually, or I say eventually, but it's going to happen really quick, and then the brain's going to interpret these signals as salty or bitter or acidic. So what are the different taste buds? Well, I just mentioned a few of them. Bitter, classic example of something bitter would be caffeine. What about salty? So there, anything French fries with table salt. What else do we have here? Sweetness. So think of anything that's sugary. We have specific receptors that detect sugar as water-soluble molecules when you take that, when you eat that ice cream cone or whatever. There's also another taste sensation, and this is a sensation that's detected from amino acids, and that's called umami. And it's fun to say, umami. Go ahead and say it. Umami. Go ahead and say it. Umami. That means delicious in Japanese. And the way that I interpret this would be if you've ever had sushi. And it is kind of a unique flavor, and it's something that you kind of have to get used to. The first time that I ever had it, I didn't really like it, but it can become tremendously kind of addicting. So about once every 4 or 5 months, I get a craving. I have to go get that umami, say it again, umami taste sensation. It's almost as fun as saying okazaki. Jonathan, say it for me. Okazaki. Anyway, umami. So that's important. What else do we need to talk about? We need to talk about the sense of smell. So the sense of smell is olfactory. Airborne molecules are going to make their way into the nasal cavities. There's going to be specialized cells that detect those airborne molecules and again convert those airborne molecules into an action potential, which then can be sent to the brain. All right, so it's olfactory sense and it's also taste buds. I have on the overhead here, we have the tongue, and then we have the anatomy of a taste bud. You are not responsible for knowing the anatomy here, but just to recap, we've got sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and, go ahead and say it, delicious. delicious. I alluded to the sour taste bud, but actually, as you know, a sour taste, lemon juice, that sort of thing. So let's take a look at a short video.
The detection of specific water-soluble molecules found in food or drink results in the sensation of taste. Specialized cells found in taste buds on the tongue contain receptors capable of interacting with molecules found in our food. When a taste receptor is stimulated, an electrical signal is produced by the sensory cell, resulting in an impulse which is transmitted to the brain and results in the perception of taste.
So notice the action potential as illustrated in the animation, and again, we're going to send that information to the brain. Same thing with the olfactory sense, so the sense of smell. We're going to convert these different chemicals that we're taking in through our nasal cavity and produce an action potential and send that off to the brain. Well, just to recap or review, does anybody remember what chromosome is an olfactory supercluster of genes? So we've got the genes on the chromosomes. Of course, there's 23 pairs of chromosomes, about 25,000 genes total. But who remembers which chromosome has many of those olfactory genes? So that is chromosome 11, and it's on the tip of chromosome 11. Interestingly enough, about 60% of our olfactory genes have been switched off. So presumably, Homo sapiens, humans like us, no longer need that large number of genes for smell because it's not as important for our survival. It's not as important to find food. It's not as important for social interactions. All right, well, we are moving on. We are moving on to the nervous system. And this is exciting. This is a really important part of the class. And I expect you in the same sitting to watch the next video on the nervous system. So, once all this stuff ends, we'll go out, we'll have some sushi. Of course, when these videos get out, I may not have a job, so you guys are treating. Have a good day. Nervous system is next. So we're back again, and this is the nervous system. We've already talked briefly about the general function of the nervous system when we gave a brief overview of all the different organ systems, so more towards the beginning of the year. The nervous system is going to use the senses that we've already discussed, whether it's pressure, touch, sense of sight, whatever. It's going to receive that stimuli, convert that stimuli into an action potential, take that stimuli in. The brain's going to receive that information. It's going to coordinate that information in certain ways, and then the brain's going to send back a response, a motor response. The nervous system is also important in homeostasis, so it works with the endocrine system to help maintain homeostasis. And of course, homeostasis, that ability for the body to maintain a steady state, is an essential theme of this course. Well, let's take a look at the organization of the nervous system. The central nervous system is a subdivision of the nervous system. Anyway, let's take a look here. So we are in hard copy now. Hard copy, the nervous system. You'll have to check for the ebook, which is off a chapter. But anyway, just look up nervous system, and you'll find it. Anyway, so there's two divisions of the nervous system. The first division here is the central nervous system. The central nervous system is often simply abbreviated the CNS. So here's the central nervous system. The central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So we'll put that here, so that's brain and spinal cord. the peripheral nervous system. Over here, let's abbreviate the peripheral nervous system, the PNS. So I'll put PNS here. The peripheral nervous system has to do with all the nervous structures that do not include the brain and the spinal cord. So the peripheral nervous system. Well, the peripheral nervous system can be subdivided into two components. So let's do that. Let's use a different color here. And we've got the peripheral nervous system. This can be broken down into the somatic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system. So we'll abbreviate the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. Well, what's the difference between the somatic and the autonomic nervous system? The somatic nervous system has to do with voluntary skeletal muscle movement. So this is voluntary skeletal muscle movement. So this has to do with our voluntary. So we've already talked about a skeletal muscle. And we talked about how where a nerve and muscle meet, we have that region there that's called the synapse. So you've got a nerve impulse that's being relayed from the central nervous system. It's making its way to skeletal muscle, like the bicep, for example. And that nerve impulse is going to stimulate, through a series of complex events, stimulate the release of a neurotransmitter. That neurotransmitter will diffuse across that tiny gap. So this is the synaptic cleft, if you recall. That neurotransmitter is then going to stimulate the skeletal muscle to eventually lead to a contraction. So this somatic nervous system has to do with voluntary muscular motions. Now right here we have the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system has to do with an unconscious or automatic response to stimuli. So let me grab something to write with here. And the autonomic nervous system can be subdivided into two components. One component of the autonomic nervous system is the sympathetic division. So the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. The other is the parasympathetic. So we have sympathetic, and now we have parasympathetic. Okay, barely got that in. Now, what does the sympathetic nervous system have to do with? The sympathetic has to do with, again, this is, I like to think of autonomic as automatic. These are responses to the world that these are internal responses that we don't have conscious control over. So the sympathetic nervous system has to do with what we'll call fight or flight responses. So these would be responses to dangerous situations, that sort of thing. An athletic event where you're really pumped up, the adrenaline's going, you would be enacting a sympathetic response. So that sympathetic response would include, if your adrenaline's pumped up and it's the fourth quarter of the game, it would be an increased breathing rate, increased heart rate. These would be two sympathetic responses. Again, fight or flight. This is an easy way to remember kind of sort of what's going on with the sympathetic nervous system. So we're going to put fight or flight. Okay, and that's sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic has to do with these involuntary responses of the body that will settle you down. So what do we mean by settling you down? We're talking about lowering the breathing rate, lowering the heart rate. At the same time, when we lower our breathing, lower our heart rate from the parasympathetic nervous system, We also increase digestive responses. So in other words, the body's settling you down, and then it says, okay, we're out of this dangerous situation, or the game's over. Now let's calm down, and maybe now let's start worrying about digesting the food that you ate 2 hours ago before that big game. Of course, some digestion's going on during that, but now it's time to kick up that response. So I like to think of the parasympathetic nervous system as not fight or flight, but rest and digest. So we'll put rest / digest. So take a look here. You're responsible for this information. The nervous system, broken down into the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, the peripheral nervous system, which can be subdivided into the somatic nervous system. I'll write system here now. And of course, the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, autonomic nervous system. Of course, these automatic responses, let's kind of clean this up a little bit, put that arrow here, can be subdivided into sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, rest and digest. Over here we have the somatic nervous system. I do want to fill in the last little bit here. So this is skeletal muscle, voluntary motions here. So I'm going to put voluntary skeletal. I'll just put voluntary muscle movement, but it is skeletal muscle. So I can squeeze it in there. So, we need to talk in detail now about the nervous system. What I want to do is talk about and show you a typical nerve cell, a typical neuron, and this is going to be a motor neuron. Motor neurons are going to send nerve impulses away from the CNS. So a motor neuron is going to stimulate, let's say, the quadricep muscles for movement, so for running, that sort of thing. So motor neurons. Of course, there's also sensory neurons. Sensory neurons receive impulses from the outside world. The rods and cones are receiving and converting light impulses into nerve impulses. So we have sensory neurons, we have motor neurons, and we also have helper neurons that act as the go-between the sensory and the motor. So here we have a touch sensation. We have a sensory neuron sending a nerve impulse towards the CNS. We then get to the brain and we get to the spinal cord, then send that information up to the brain. We're going to process that with these interneurons. We then are going to evoke a response where a motor neuron is going to send an action potential out to, let's say, the skeletal muscle so we can respond to that stimuli. Another important aspect here are going to be reflexes. So we're going to be dealing with all this for the next couple lectures. All right, so we are going to go to the book, and I'm going to have to set up shop over in that direction. All right, in that direction. All right.